My name's Jack, and I'm in the Army right now. My wife Amber and I have been married for 6 years. We have no kids yet, but we've been talking about starting a family once I retire from active duty. At least, that was the plan. For most of our marriage, I've been stationed overseas on and off, and Amber has always handled the distance like a champ, or so I thought. She's independent, strong-willed, and never hesitated to remind me how self-sufficient she is. "I'm proud of you for serving," she'd say, "but don't worry about me. I can take care of myself." When I got deployed 8 months ago, I had no reason to suspect anything would be different. She was supportive as usual, kissing me goodbye and promising to hold down the fort while I was away. We'd text almost daily, and she'd always tell me how much she missed me, how quiet the house felt without me there. Then Jamal entered. He moved into our neighborhood about a year ago, and while I didn't know him well, Amber always spoke highly of him. "He's so nice," she'd say, "always offering to help out when you're not around. It's good to have someone like that next door." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Jamal seemed like a decent guy, polite, friendly, always waving when I saw him. Amber would mention him occasionally, like when he helped her fix a leaky faucet or took in our trash bins while she was at work. "Jamal's just a good neighbor," she said. But now, I can't help but wonder if she was laying the groundwork for something much darker. The first red flag came about 3 months into my deployment. Amber's texts became less frequent, and when she did respond, they felt off. Short, vague answers that didn't sound like her. "How's everything at home?" I asked one night. "Fine, just busy," she replied. "Work's been crazy lately." "What about Jamal? Is he still being the perfect neighbor?" There was a pause before she responded. "Yeah, he's been helping out a bit. It's nice to have someone to talk to, you know?" I ignored the knot in my stomach and told myself I was overthinking it. Amber had never given me a reason to doubt her before, and I wasn't about to start now. But then came the photos. One of my Army buddies, Mark, has a wife who's friends with Amber on social media. He showed me a picture she'd posted, Amber and Jamal standing a little too close in our driveway, laughing like they were the stars of some romantic comedy. The caption read, "Best neighbor ever. Thanks for the help today, Jamal." "Is that the guy next door?" Mark asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Amber's always talking about how helpful he is." Mark gave me a look, the kind that said, "You're blind if you don't see it." That picture stuck with me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started paying closer attention to Amber's behavior during our calls. She was always too busy, too distracted, and her excuses started piling up. "Sorry I missed your call," she'd say. "I was at the gym," or "I didn't hear my phone." Jamal was helping me with the Wi-Fi. It felt like Jamal was always around, always conveniently there to help out. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut was screaming at me. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to a friend back home who owed me a favor, a tech-savvy guy named Ryan who worked in security systems. "Can you set up some cameras around my house?" I asked. "Sure," Ryan said. "What's going on?" "Just a hunch," I replied, not wanting to admit how paranoid I felt. A week later, the cameras were installed, discrete ones in the living room, kitchen, and driveway. Ryan even hooked up motion alerts so I'd get notified if anything unusual happened. It didn't take long for the first alert to come through. It was late one night when I got the notification. I was in the barracks, trying to wind down after a long day when my phone buzzed. The app Ryan had set up showed an alert. Motion detected, living room. At first, I thought it might just be Amber moving around. Maybe she couldn't sleep. But when I opened the live feed, my stomach dropped. There was Jamal, sitting on my couch. He was sprawled out like he owned the place, holding a drink in one hand and flipping through channels with the other. Amber appeared moments later, wearing one of those tight little dresses she only ever put on for date nights. She handed him another drink and sat down beside him, closer than any friendly neighbor should. I watched in disbelief as they talked and laughed, their body language screaming intimacy. She leaned in, her hand brushing his arm, and he didn't hesitate to put his hand on her knee. I was frozen. Part of me wanted to believe it was innocent, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew. I knew this wasn't just some harmless hangout. I recorded the footage, saving it to a folder I'd labeled evidence. The next few days were hell. I tried to act normal during our calls, but every time Amber spoke, all I could think about was her sitting on that couch with Jamal. I kept telling myself I needed more proof before confronting her, but the doubt was eating me alive. Another alert came through a week later, this time from the kitchen camera. I opened the feed and immediately felt a wave of anger wash over me. Amber and Jamal were in the kitchen, and this time, there was no mistaking what was happening. She was leaning against the counter, laughing as he stood close, too close. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering on her cheek. Then she kissed him. It wasn't a quick peck, either. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with a passion I hadn't seen from her in months. My chest tightened as I watched them, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. When the kiss broke, she whispered something I couldn't hear, and they both laughed like they didn't have a care in the world. I recorded the footage and added it to the folder. At this point, I knew I couldn't sit on this forever. I called Ryan and asked if he could add audio to the cameras. "Yeah, it's doable," he said. "What's going on, man? You've been acting off lately." I hesitated before telling him everything. The late-night hangouts, the kiss, the gut-wrenching betrayal I couldn't ignore any longer. Ryan didn't say much, but I could hear the anger in his voice when he finally spoke. "I'll set it up. You deserve the truth." With the audio installed, I braced myself for whatever came next. I didn't have to wait long. A few nights later, another alert came through, this time from the bedroom camera. My heart sank as I opened the feed, knowing I wasn't ready for what I was about to see. Amber and Jamal were in my bedroom. Our bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing lingerie I'd bought her for our anniversary. He stood in front of her, his hands on her hips as they kissed. Their conversation was muffled at first, but then I heard Amber's voice clear as day. "I just get so lonely when Jake's gone," she said, her tone dripping with fake vulnerability. "You're the only one who understands me." Jamal chuckled, his voice deep and confident. "I told you, baby. I'll take care of you. He doesn't need to know." I closed the feed, my hands shaking with rage. My wife, the woman I'd trusted with my heart, was screwing our neighbor in the bed we shared. After watching Amber and Jamal in our bedroom, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The betrayal was too raw, too visceral. Every time Amber texted me with her usual "miss you so much, babe," or "can't wait for you to come home," I felt like smashing my phone against the wall. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept collecting evidence. If she wanted to play games, I'd make sure she lost spectacularly. The next alert came 2 days later, and this one shattered any remaining illusions I had about my wife. It was from the living room camera again. When I opened the feed, I saw Amber and Jamal tangled together on the couch, their clothes half off. Their conversation made my stomach turn. "You sure he's not coming back anytime soon?" Jamal asked, his hands roaming over her body. Amber laughed, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Jake's halfway across the world. He has no idea. And even if he did, what's he gonna do? He's a soldier, not a detective." Jamal grinned, leaning in to kiss her neck. "Damn, girl, you've got this all figured out." "Of course I do," she purred. "He's so trusting. It's almost too easy." Hearing her say that, hearing the contempt in her voice when talking about me, was like a punch to the gut. I recorded every second, saving it alongside the other footage. The final nail in the coffin came a week later, when Amber called me out of the blue. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind of tone she used when she wanted something. "Hey babe," she said, "I was thinking maybe we should upgrade the security system. You know, just to feel extra safe while you're gone." I bit back a laugh. She knows something's up. "Why now?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, Jamal mentioned it," she said quickly. "He's been so helpful while you're away, and he thought it might be a good idea." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "That's considerate of him," I said. "I'll look into it." Her relief was palpable. "Thanks, babe. I just want to make sure everything's perfect for when you come home." "Of course," I replied, my voice cold. "Anything for you." After that call, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. My deployment was scheduled to last another 3 months, but I pulled some strings to get an early return. My commanding officer was sympathetic when I explained the situation, though I left out the sordid details. "Take care of your family," he said. I nodded, thinking, that's exactly what I'm about to do. When I arrived home a week later, I didn't tell Amber. I wanted to catch her in the act, to see just how far she'd take this charade. Ryan picked me up from the airport, and we spent the ride going over the plan. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready since the first alert," I said. "It's time she sees what happens when you betray someone who'd do anything for you." I parked down the street from my house, my heart pounding as I approached the front door. I didn't even have to unlock it. Amber had left it ajar, the faint sounds of music and laughter drifting out. Inside, I found in the kitchen. Amber was perched on the counter, wearing nothing but a silky robe, while Jamal stood between her legs, his hands gripping her thighs. They didn't notice me at first. "You're incredible, baby," Jamal said, kissing her neck. "How'd I get so lucky?" Amber giggled. "You're the one keeping me sane while Jake's gone. I don't know what I'd do without you." "That makes two of us," I said, stepping into the room. Their heads snapped toward me, their faces going pale. "Jake!" Amber shrieked, scrambling off the counter. What are you doing here?" I crossed my arms, my voice steady. "Came home early. Thought I'd surprise my loving wife. Guess the surprise is on me, huh?" Jamal backed away, his hands up. "Hey man, I didn't know." "Save it," I snapped. "I've been watching. I know everything." The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Amber stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Jamal shifted uncomfortably, his towering frame looking much smaller as he tried to avoid my glare. "Jake, I can explain," Amber stammered, her voice trembling. "This isn't what it looks like." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Oh, really? Because it looks like my wife has been screwing the neighbor while I've been halfway across the world serving our country. Did I miss something?" Jamal took a step back, his hands raised defensively. "Man, I didn't know you were coming back so soon." "She said." "I don't give a damn what she said." I barked, cutting him off. "Get out of my house. Now!" He hesitated, glancing at Amber as if she might come to his defense. When she didn't, he grabbed his jacket and bolted out the back door without another word. Amber flinched as the door slammed shut, her eyes welling with tears. "Jake, please," she whispered. "I messed up, okay? I was lonely. I didn't know how to handle you, being gone so much. Don't you dare try to make this about me." I snapped, stepping closer. "You knew exactly what you were doing. Hell, you even bragged about how easy it was to fool me. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, opening the app Ryan had set up. With a few taps, I played the footage of her and Jamal kissing in the kitchen. Her voice echoed through the room. "He's so trusting. It's almost too easy." Amber's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor, covering her face with her hands. "Oh my God," she sobbed. "You were spying on me?" "Don't even try to turn this around," I said, my voice cold. "I trusted you. I worked my ass off to give us a good life. And this is how you repay me? By screwing the guy next door and laughing about it behind my back." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. "It was a mistake, Jake. I was weak, and Jamal was just there. But it didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I repeated, my fists clenching at my sides. "You brought him into our home, into our bed, and you're telling me it didn't mean anything?" She reached out, grabbing my arm. "Please, Jake, we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't leave me." I yanked my arm away, glaring down at her. "You think I'd stay after this? You think you can cry your way out of this?" Her sobs grew louder, but I felt nothing. No pity, no regret, just a cold, burning rage. I needed air. Grabbing my phone, I walked out onto the porch, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the footage I'd collected. Every kiss, every touch, every smug word Amber and Jamal had shared. It was all there, proof of her betrayal. Ryan had been right. I deserved the truth. And now, I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. I sent the videos to a private group chat with some of our neighbors, titling it, "The Real Amber." Within minutes, my phone was blowing up with messages. "Is this real? Holy crap, Jake. I'm so sorry. I can't believe she did this to you. Jamal's done. Everyone's going to see this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The videos spoke for themselves. When I finally went back inside, Amber was still on the floor, clutching her knees to her chest. She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you going to do?" "I already did it," I said, my tone icy. "The neighbors know. Everyone's going to know." Her face twisted in horror. "Hucky, no, you can't. Please. I'll lose everything." "Good," I said, crossing my arms. "You don't deserve anything after what you've done." The fallout from the videos was immediate and brutal. Within hours, the group chat had exploded, and the story of Amber and Jamal's affair spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. People who had once admired Amber's bubbly personality and charming demeanor now saw her for who she really was, a liar and a cheat. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of texts and missed calls from friends, neighbors, and even Amber's family. Some were supportive, others were just fishing for more drama. "Jake, I can't believe this. Are you okay? Bro, this is insane. I knew something was off with her. Amber's parents are freaking out. They want to talk to you." I ignored most of them, too drained to deal with the constant barrage. Amber, on the other hand, wasn't faring nearly as well. When I went downstairs, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her phone clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up at me, her voice shaking. "Jake, people are calling me nonstop," she said. "They're saying horrible things. Why would you do this? Why would I do this?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've got some nerve, Amber. You're the one who destroyed our marriage, not me. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." She stood up, slamming her phone down on the table. "But you've ruined my reputation. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" I laughed bitterly. "Oh, you're humiliated? Good. Now you know how I felt watching you screw our neighbor in my house, in my bed." Amber opened her mouth to argue, but stopped when her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, her face twisting in frustration. "It's my mom," she muttered, wiping her eyes. "Answer it," I said. "I'm sure she'd love to hear your side of the story." She hesitated before picking up, her voice trembling. I grabbed my keys and left the house, needing to clear my head. When I returned later that afternoon, Amber was gone. Her clothes, her bags, even her car, everything was missing. At first, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe she'd finally realized there was no coming back from this. But then I noticed the note she'd left on the kitchen counter. "Jake, I can't stay here anymore. I need time to figure things out. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But please don't make this worse than it already is. I'll be staying with my parents for now. Amber." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. She thought leaving would solve everything, but she couldn't run from the truth. Over the next few days, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. People whispered about the affair at barbecues, texted each other screenshots of the videos, and avoided making eye contact with Jamal whenever he stepped outside. As for Jamal, he didn't stick around for long. A "for rent" sign appeared in his yard by the end of the week, and by the time I saw him again, he was loading boxes into a moving truck. We locked eyes for a moment, and I couldn't help but smirk. He looked like a broken man, his usual swagger completely gone. "Good luck wherever you're going," I called out, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He didn't respond. Amber tried reaching out a few more times, but I ignored her calls and texts. She even showed up at the house once, banging on the door and begging me to talk, but I didn't let her in. Eventually, she gave up, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my life without her. With Amber gone and Jamal out of the picture, the house felt quieter than it had in months. But it wasn't peaceful. Every room reminded me of the lies, the betrayal, and the years I'd wasted trusting someone who clearly didn't deserve it. I knew I couldn't let her have any control over my life moving forward. The first thing I did was call my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. "She cheated, and I've got the proof," I explained. "I want this to go as quickly as possible, and I don't want her walking away with a penny more than she's entitled to." My lawyer chuckled. "With the evidence you've got, this will be a slam dunk. I'll make sure she doesn't try anything sneaky." That was the plan: keep it clean, efficient, and ruthless. Amber's parents called me a few days later, asking to meet. I agreed, curious to hear what they had to say. They'd always been polite but distant, and I wasn't sure whose side they'd take. When I arrived at their house, they were waiting on the porch, their faces somber. "We're so sorry, Jake," her mom said, ushering me inside. "We had no idea Amber was capable of this." Her dad shook his head, his jaw clenched. "She's been staying here, but we made it clear she's not welcome to stay long. What she did to you was unforgivable." I nodded, appreciating their support. "I just want to move on." She made her choices, and now she has to live with them. They both agreed, offering their help if I needed anything. It was bittersweet, knowing they were on my side, but also realizing how deeply Amber's actions had hurt them too. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was still buzzing. People I barely knew were stopping me at the grocery store, offering sympathy or slyly asking for details. "Can't believe she did that to you, man," one guy said, shaking his head. "You're better off without her." "I know," I replied, forcing a smile. "Thanks." While the attention was overwhelming at times, it also felt like justice. Amber had spent years building her perfect image, and now it was crumbling around her. One evening, I got a call from Ryan. "Hey man," he said. "How are you holding up?" "Better," I admitted. "It's been a whirlwind, but I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." "That's good to hear," he said. "Listen, a few of us were talking, and we thought you should come out with us this weekend. Blow off some steam." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to jump back into socializing, but Ryan was persistent. "Come on, Jake. You deserve a break. Besides, it's time to remind yourself there's more to life than Amber and her drama." I agreed, figuring a night out couldn't hurt. That weekend, we hit a local bar, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely relaxed. My friends were cracking jokes, the drinks were flowing, and for a few hours, I almost forgot about the mess I'd left behind. Toward the end of the night, a woman approached me. Sarah, 30F, a friend of Ryan's who'd heard about my situation. She was smart, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. "I can't imagine what you've been through," she said, her tone sympathetic but not pitying. "But for what it's worth, you handled it better than most people would have." "Thanks," I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. We exchanged numbers before the night ended, and while I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, it felt good to connect with someone who wasn't tied to the chaos of my past. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and tense phone calls from Amber. I knew the divorce wouldn't be simple. Amber wasn't the type to back down quietly, but I wasn't prepared for just how low she'd stoop. It started when my lawyer called with an update. Amber's lawyer sent over a counterproposal, he said, his voice laced with irritation. "She's asking for spousal support and half the house." I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you kidding me? She cheated on me, and now she wants me to pay for her betrayal?" "That's her angle," he replied. "But don't worry. With the evidence we have, she doesn't stand a chance." Amber's next move was to try to contact me directly. She left voicemail after voicemail, each one more desperate than the last. "Jake, please, we can work this out without lawyers." "I don't want to fight with you," she pleaded in one. In another, her tone shifted to anger. "I gave up so much for you, Jake. You owe me." I ignored them all, letting her words roll off me like water. She could scream, cry, and manipulate all she wanted. There was no way I was giving her a single cent more than she deserved. The turning point came during a mediation meeting with our lawyers. Amber showed up looking polished and confident, like she thought she could charm her way out of this mess. "Jake," she began, her voice soft. "We've been through so much together. Don't you think we can handle this like adults?" I smirked, sliding a USB drive across the table. "I'd say I'm handling it just fine. This is for your lawyer. Every bit of proof I have of your affair. Footage, audio, texts. Let's see how that holds up in court." Her face went pale as her lawyer plugged the drive into his laptop. The room was silent except for the clicking of keys and the occasional gasp from her lawyer as he scrolled through the evidence. "This is substantial," he finally said, closing the laptop. "Amber, we need to talk." Amber's confidence evaporated, replaced by thinly veiled panic. "Jake, please." "You're not in a position to beg," I said coldly. "You cheated, lied, and humiliated me. The only thing you're getting from this divorce is what the law requires. No more, no less." After that meeting, Amber's call stopped. Her lawyer submitted a new agreement a week later, one that was much more reasonable. She wouldn't get a dime of spousal support, and I'd keep the house. When the final papers were signed, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The marriage that had once been my whole world was officially over, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was still reeling from the scandal. Every time I stepped outside, someone stopped me to offer support or gossip about Amber and Jamal. Jamal's landlord said he left town. One neighbor told me. Guess he couldn't handle the heat. And Amber? I asked, curious despite myself. She's been laying low at her parents' house. I don't think she's coming back. Good riddance, I thought. With the divorce finalized and Amber out of my life, I started focusing on putting the pieces back together. The house, once a painful reminder of her betrayal, became my project. I replaced the furniture she had picked out, repainted the walls, and even tore up the old carpet to install hardwood floors. Every change felt like a step forward, a way to reclaim what she'd tainted. The bedroom, in particular, got a complete overhaul. I refused to let it remain the scene of her affair. By the time I was done, it was unrecognizable, a clean slate for the next chapter of my life. The neighborhood slowly settled down, but Amber's name still lingered in whispers. People stopped me at the mailbox or during my runs to share the latest gossip. I heard Amber try to get a job back in town, but no one will hire her, one neighbor said. Another chimed in. Her parents are furious. Apparently, they're embarrassed to even show their faces at church. I didn't feel sorry for her. She made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. Ryan, my tech-savvy friend, stayed in touch throughout the whole process. One day, he showed up with a six-pack and a grin. "Ready to celebrate your freedom?" he asked, holding up the beers. We sat on the porch, reminiscing about the whirlwind of the past few months. "You handled it like a champ," Ryan said, clinking his bottle against mine. "Most guys would have lost it, but you kept your cool and came out on top." I chuckled. It didn't feel like it at the time, but yeah, I guess I did. "Seriously," he continued, "Amber thought she had you wrapped around her finger, but you flipped the script. That takes guts." I nodded, taking a sip of my beer. "I just hope I never have to go through something like this again." "You won't," Ryan said confidently. "You've got your head on straight now. And hey, you've got options." I laughed, shaking my head. Not ready for that yet. But options did seem to be presenting themselves. Sarah, the woman I'd met through Ryan, texted me out of the blue one day. "Hey, just checking in. Hope things are looking up for you." Her message caught me off guard, but I couldn't deny the warmth it brought. We started texting more regularly, sharing jokes and stories about our lives. It was easy, refreshing, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. Meanwhile, Amber's attempts to contact me dwindled to nothing. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was struggling to rebuild her life, bouncing between jobs and relying heavily on her parents for support. "She made her bed," Ryan said when I mentioned it. "Now she has to lie in it." And he was right. I didn't owe her anything. Not my sympathy, not my time, and certainly not my forgiveness. One evening, I stood in the backyard, looking out at the sunset. The house was quiet, peaceful. For so long, it had been a place of pain and betrayal, but now it felt like mine again, a sanctuary. As I took a deep breath, I realized I wasn't just moving on, I was thriving. A few weeks after the dust had settled, I got a call from a mutual friend of Amber and me, one of the few people who had stayed neutral throughout the ordeal. Her name was Lisa, and though we hadn't spoken much since the divorce, her voice on the phone sounded urgent. "Jake," she began, "you're not going to believe this. Amber's been trying to spin the story." I sighed, already tired of the drama. "What she's saying now? She's telling people you were the one who neglected her, that you pushed her into Jamal's arms." I laughed bitterly. Of course, she's playing the victim. That's her specialty. Lisa hesitated before continuing. "She's also trying to get sympathy from some of the neighbors. She wants them to pressure you into letting her move back." That got my attention. "Move back? Into my house? After everything she did?" "She's desperate," Lisa said. "Her parents are getting tired of supporting her, and she burned too many bridges. But don't worry. No one's buying it." I shook my head, amazed at her audacity. She can spin it however she wants, but I'm done with her. Let her dig her own grave. Amber's attempts to garner sympathy backfired spectacularly. The neighbors who had once admired her now saw her for what she was, a manipulative, self-centered liar. She came over to my house yesterday, one neighbor told me. Tried to tell me you were controlling and that she made a mistake because she felt trapped. I told her to leave. Good for you, I replied, genuinely grateful for the support. The breaking point came when Amber showed up unannounced one evening. I was in the middle of dinner when I heard the frantic pounding on the door. I opened it to find her standing there, disheveled and frantic. "Jake, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Just hear me out." "No," I said firmly, stepping back to close the door. "Wait," she cried, sticking her foot in the frame. "I'm sorry. Okay. I know I messed up, but I'm trying to fix things. We can start over. We can make this work. You stay out here. Incredulous. Amber, there's no we anymore. You destroyed that when you decided to cheat and lie. You don't get to come back here and pretend none of it happened." Her sobs grew louder, and she clutched at the doorframe. "I've lost everything, Jake. My job, my friends, everyone's turned their back on me. You're the only one who can help me. I'm not responsible for your choices," I said coldly. "And I'm certainly not responsible for fixing the mess you made." I stepped back, letting her foot slide free of the doorframe, and shut the door in her face. Her muffled sobs echoed through the wood for a few moments before they faded into silence. That was the last time I saw Amber. She left a few more voicemails over the next week, but I didn't bother listening to them. I blocked her number and moved on with my life. Meanwhile, things with Sarah were progressing naturally. We weren't rushing into anything, but our conversations grew deeper, and our connection felt genuine. She was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest. Everything Amber had pretended to be, but never was. "You're glowing," Ryan teased one day after I mentioned her. "Looks like someone's finally found his groove again." "Maybe," I admitted, grinning. "But I'm taking my time this time around." "Smart man," he said, raising his drink in a toast. "Here's to leaving the past behind." Amber's chapter in my life was officially closed, and for the first time in years, I felt free to write my own story. With Amber completely out of my life, the healing process truly began. The weight of her betrayal no longer haunted me. Instead, it became a lesson, a painful but necessary reminder of what I deserved and what I would never tolerate again. I focused on the things that brought me peace. I threw myself into hobbies I'd neglected during my marriage: hiking, woodworking, and even volunteering with a veterans organization. The structure and camaraderie helped me rebuild my confidence, piece by piece. Things with Sarah continued to progress slowly but steadily. She was patient, understanding, and never pushed me for more than I was ready to give. One evening, we were sitting on my newly furnished patio, sipping wine and watching the sunset. She glanced at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You seem lighter," she said. "Happier." "I am," I admitted, taking a sip of my wine. "It's like I can finally breathe again." She reached out, placing her hand on mine. "You deserve this, Jake. You deserve to be happy." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. As the weeks turned into months, Amber became little more than a ghost in my past. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets about her through the grapevine. She was struggling to hold down a job. Her parents had grown frustrated with her, and she was still trying to claw her way back into the good graces of anyone who would listen. But none of it mattered to me. Her choices were her own, and I was done carrying the burden of her mistakes. One afternoon, as I was cleaning out the last of Amber's things from the attic, I came across an old photo album. Flipping through it, I saw snapshots of our early years together. Smiling faces, happy memories, a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. Not for Amber, but for the man I'd been back then, naive, trusting, and completely unaware of the storm that was coming. But as I closed the album and placed it in the donation pile, I felt a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was over, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Now, as I sit here writing this, I can honestly say I'm in a better place than I ever thought possible. The betrayal, the lies, and the heartbreak, they were devastating, but they didn't break me. If anything, they made me stronger. Amber taught me what I don't want in a partner. And Sarah? She's showing me what love is supposed to look like. Honest, patient, and real. To anyone out there dealing with a similar betrayal, know this. It gets better. You'll find your way out of the darkness. And when you do, you'll realize just how strong you are. Here's to new beginnings.